Are there any apologies for today's meeting? I think we have a full muster and it's the intent of our Mayor to join us, but he hasn't yet. He has. Any declarations of councillor conflict of interest? Appears to be none. Any urgent late business? Likewise, none. The first matter of substance on our agenda today is a notice of motion that's been received from Councillor Glenys Dixon. Glenys, would you like to introduce it, please?
Thank you, Your Acting Worship. In accordance with Clause 24(1) of Council Standing Orders, I propose an amendment to the motion passed at the Council meeting on the 10th of October 2023 relating to the planting of 5 crab apple trees in the main street. Elected members, when debating this issue, were unaware of the $300 daily charge incurred if the trees were not planted in the already evacuated holes. This is a significant factor given the length of time the holes would remain unplanted in the retailer's busiest time of the year, while a community engagement process is undertaken. I believe the cost, if known at the time, would potentially change the way some councillors voted. Therefore, I move the proposed motion.
Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Reid, thank you. Comment, discussion, opening it up. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Paul McPhail.
Thank you, Your Acting Worship. I'd just like to back that motion, having talked to a lot of the retailers down the main street and about obviously the cost is a major factor, as well as most of the people just want the trees finished, done and dusted, tidied up before Christmas so they can get on with their business. So I think it's a good motion, so I'm backing that. Thank you.
Any further comments? Councillor Richard McPhail.
Yes, just through your worship. Obviously the information before us has changed, and yeah, I'm probably like everyone else sitting at the table here, acknowledging the fact that there's a significant amount of money or expenditure to continue the way we are. The only question I would ask is probably through to if it does go round the businesses, do they remove the trees? If we go, so the trees that are going in are remaining permanently there. That was one of the questions I was asked. So once they're in, they're completely done, and it will cease at that point, or maybe to the CEO. Thanks, Steve.
Yes, through you, Acting Your Worship. Yeah, the intent of the motion is that the trees will be planted on a permanent basis in the holes that have already been excavated, and the balance of the program will be subject to the consultation process. But the motion recognises that we've dug the holes, we've got the trees, put them in, and then call time on the project at that point, and then seek public input as to whether the process should be continued throughout the whole of the main street. But if the program wasn't to be discontinued, we would not be extracting the trees out of those holes.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Havel. I was just wondering if I could ask Mr McRoby, please, how many trees are covered by the rest of the plantings other than the main street?
Yeah, just another 5 trees, and it's down this end of the main street. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Any further feedback or comment? Councillor McKenzie.
Just one question. Do we already own the steelwork, etc., that goes in the ground? Do we?
Yes, we do.
That's all. Thank you.
last opportunity for any comment. So we have a motion on the table that's been moved and seconded, the effect of which is to amend the resolution from our earlier meeting so that the trees ready to be planted in the holes that are already existing will continue, but that the council will consult on the use of trees in the other locations. Is everyone understanding of that? So all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. The next item on the agenda is the adoption of the draft annual report with memo and other documents prepared by the General Manager of Corporate Support. Lene, I think this is an appropriate time to give us a brief overview and comment given the length of the document.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Hovell. And through you, we have got agonisingly close to adoption today. The Audit and Risk Committee heard earlier this afternoon that the auditors are only 2 days away from tidying up their loose ends. So what we'll be proposing is slightly different when we get to the end with the motions. But I thought it's worthy to go over some of the highlights and some of the challenges that the Council has faced this year. And as you'll see, we've had some great success with some grants from the government. We've had Shovel Ready, we've had Better Off funding, and we've got some good projects, good assets that have come out of it, like the library and community rooms next door, and wastewater renewal projects and the like. So there's been some really, really good news stories for the year. I guess where we ended up is that we had always planned to have a deficit this year. So in the annual plan that was adopted, we had planned to have a deficit of 763,000, and our actual deficit has proved to be 2.4 million. Now there are two really key items that make up this deficit. One is depreciation, and the depreciation was 1.3 million over what we had budgeted. At the time that the annual plan was adopted, the revaluations for the 21-22 year had not been completed, and we could not anticipate the increase that amounted out of that revaluation. Whilst we had budgeted 22 million increase in our infrastructural assets, we ended up with a 66 million increase, and that was largely due to inflationary pressures and the cost of goods now in the construction market. What the flow-on effect for that meant is that we had under-budgeted our depreciation. So it's a non-cash item, but is 1.3 million of the 1.6 million variance to what we've got on the 763k. The other main variance is in roading, and it's a $1 million overspent in the roading maintenance. What this relates to was the Streets Alive project. Not the Streets Alive project, sorry, the bridge project. We're watching Mario there. No, it's a bridge project over the river to take the pipes across. This was budgeted to be a capital expenditure item, and it would have been capitalised had that project progressed. But unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, the elected members in May made the decision that we'll go under the river. So what we had spent today had been sitting in work in progress, and with the project not progressing, it then needed to be an expense because there's going to be no asset to capitalise against. We need to point out that of that 919k that was related to the bridge project that was sitting in work in progress, $514,000 had been received from Waka Kotahi in a previous year for revenue. So the net effect on the council over the 2 years is a $400,000, I guess, hit, for want of a better word. The other areas that we found challenging were in personnel costs. Now, the government in May this year said that wage inflation was rising at a higher rate than ordinary inflation. We experienced this as well, and we had a number of positions that were hard to fill that we had to pay market rates at, in some cases, 30% above what we had previously employed our previous staff at. We had some unbudgeted positions come on with the new council and the new committee structure. We had a fixed term policy analyst come on that had been unbudgeted, which also adds to the overspend in personnel costs. It was the full year for the introduction of the new Tier 2 management structure, and that contributed as well. But there's a number of, and you'll see in my memo, there's a number of different positions that helped contribute to that. I think that's probably a good overview of where we're at. I'm happy to take some questions from elected members.
Councillors, the way I want to proceed on this is that we'll deal with questions first on the document. Then there's some recommendations that are in the report on page 4. But as highlighted by Lorne there, the third one will need to be altered, and the Chief Executive can talk to that. I'd then like to put the motions, have a seconder, and then have any debate that may be required. So are there any questions that flow from the document, please? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Just a question for our Chief Financial Officer, please. Page 88, there's a substantial increase in democracy. Could you clarify that for me, where those numbers fell, please?
Through you, Acting Mayor Hobell. Right, so what that shows is that's an expenditure for democracy and administration, and the variance is around $1 million on last year. Of that, over $500,000 relates to the democracy activity, and it's for unbudgeted items. So in the past, we've never had a budget in democracy for legal expenses. We've never needed it. This year, we've had the year under review, we've had $104,000 worth of legal expenses in that activity. There have also been some facilitated conversations that elected members have been part of that were unbudgeted. There's the costs of additional training for new members. There's an increase in travel expenditure for, I guess, our new mayor to go up and meet and greet and attend a lot more meetings. So compared to our previous mayor, there is a lot more travel and accommodation expenditure in there. The other part that makes up the difference sits in both administration and in information technology, and combined that's around $500,000 as well. Now, within that, for administration, there's around $200,000 in Three Waters transition costs, but that is completely offset by income on the other side and the revenue side, so that has a nil impact on our bottom line. As I've talked, there were some unbudgeted positions with the new committee structure, with the policy analyst having to be brought on board. There's a Tier 2 management restructure, and at the time that the annual plan was set, we had not had all our notification of increases in for software licences. So a number of those software licences were notified after we had set the annual plan for 22-23, and some of those have increased significantly. So these will be reviewed and addressed as part of our long-term plan process going forward.
Thank you very much for that.
Any other questions? Mr. Parry, then, in terms of the recommendations that are on page 4 of the agenda, I know you've given some thought as to a rewording for that.
I have, thank you, Mr. Chair, but I've forgot to bring my computer, and I've emailed actually Lorne the suggested. Thank you. So in light of the auditors saying they're just not quite ready to absolutely sign off, and they gave that advice as recently as 2 hours ago in the Audit and Risk Committee meeting, just wanted to alter the package of recommendations. So the first one will remain as is, as suggested. The second one is that, subject to any technical adjustments requested by auditors Deloitte, that the annual report for the year ending 30 June 2023 be adopted, because audits are just doing some checks and balances, final checks and balances, and that the interim chief executive be authorised to make any technical adjustments sought by Deloitte, along with typographical and layout changes deemed necessary for publication of the document.
Before I ask for a mover, are there any questions that arise from the way that that's worded? All right, and I think we'll deal with the three of them together. So can I have a mover for those three recommendations? Thank you, Councillor McDonnell. And seconded by Councillor Phillips. Is there any discussion? There appears to be none. I will put those three motions. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. I also want to add a further motion, and I would like to move that the Council recognises and appreciates the considerable commitment and professional manner of the Chief Financial Officer and her team, the staff and Deloitte, in completing the complex and time-consuming task of preparing the annual report in a timely manner. Can I have a seconder for that motion, please? Thank you, Councillor McDonnell. Any discussion that people want to have on that motion? Councillor Gardine.
It's certainly a big improvement on last year, and I think we won't quite make the mark of the end of the month, but we're just a fraction over. And that'll be a good outcome.
Any other comment, feedback? Appears to be none, so I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Renee, thank you for your efforts. Item 6 is the Chief Executive's investigation into local council meetings and workshops, and you will see...
Chief Ombudsman.
Sorry?
Chief Ombudsman.
Chief Ombudsman, what did I say?
Chief Executive.
Oh, Chief Executive.
No.
There was a memo from the Chief Executive at my request, and you will see the memo on pages 5 and 6 of the agenda, where it's highlighted that there are some current practices that we tick the boxes on, but there are others that we don't. So before looking at the recommendations, I'll just invite any councillors wanting to comment further on the report. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's much easier to say that. It's a very lengthy report. I don't see anything that's been wrong with the way we've held our workshops and briefings, but anyway, there's always room for improvement. But I do think that that's something we should consider very carefully, how we actually go about what we decide to do. And I notice in his report, some of the words he's used are considering, or you may consider. So I think we need to actually have a workshop to discuss that and consider it.
Any other comments? Councillor Dixon.
I would second that I believe that we do need to consider all of this document here that's in front of us. There's some very good suggestions for us.
Any other comment? Councillor Paul McPhail.
Thank you. No, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Acting Mayor.
Acting Mayor will do. Yeah, thank you. Actually, interesting. Plain English is what I was going to say here. That's right throughout his report. It talks about plain English, and that's one of the key things coming on as a new councillor. The gobbledygook and everything else that we don't understand for a start, and I'm sure as a member of public coming into this, plain English is a key thing I think we need to work on for reporting. So that's my bit. Thank you.
Any other comments? I've taken the opportunity of having a skim read of the entire document, plus a number of the attachments that were there, and I think the key message that comes out of it is that there are provisions in the Act that allow councils to operate without the public present, and we need to be very mindful of the way that we do that, given that the need for openness, transparency, and it's something that a number of councillors around the table talked about before the previous election. And I see this as really the opportunity of putting that into practice and working through the issues. As I highlighted, there was a number of issues in the report that we do tick the boxes, but we need to be more mindful. I had about 20 bullet points of what I'd consider good practice that we need to be looking at. And while the Ombudsman is critical of the number of workshops that council have and the way that they're reported to the public, and I think that that is something that we need to be picking up on more and sharing more of what we're doing. But there are tests and there are times when we do need to withhold information, particularly where it comes to financial matters, contracts with our suppliers, etc. The appendices, there was one that dealt with Waimakariri that I thought made particularly good reading, where that council has a policy that sets out not only for the benefit of staff but also for elected officials and the public in terms of the way that the council administers its committee meetings, its workshops and its briefings, and it differentiates between the three of them. Having said that, if we are more open in what we do, then I think that the press also has an important role to play. If councillors are going to be openly making suggestions, it is important that they are reported as ideas that are being floated rather than a view that has been put forward that the council should be doing something. And I'm keen to work with reporters and other media to actually come up with a wording that should be used at the front of all articles that highlights this is an ideas meeting, it is not decision making or making comments. We have a recommendation in front of us that the report be received and secondly that we seek specific changes. The length of the reports and everything that goes with it is far too complex to come up with specific changes that we should follow today. So I think that rather than the second recommendation that we've got there, my thought was that it is highly desirable that we have a policy, and that is the direction that I would like to head. And it was my intent to recommend that we ask the staff to prepare a policy, but having listened to a couple of councillors, I think it's a case where we have a workshop to work through a number of issues. Chief Executive, would you see that as the best way of actually providing some direction to inform a further report and highlighting a policy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, look, if it's to do a proper job and make sure that it's elected member driven, not staff driven, a workshop to work out how you will actually work in workshops is probably a good idea. And you may want to get off on the right note by having that in a public setting, because it's only a process-oriented issue. And clearly, I mean, one thing I would add is that there's a lot of intrigue about workshops, but having been around the traps a while, I don't know whether they're going to be a bestseller in terms of if you were live streaming and asking people to tune in, because by their nature, they are actually exploratory conversations or working through some technical matter before you can get to shape up some options that will eventually find their way into a report that will come to on a public agenda. But I think a workshop is good because there's quite a lot in that Ombudsman's report and we can systematically go through it. Yes, develop a policy around workshops, briefings, what's in, what's out, but there may be other things that other elected members can bring to the table and suggest that we can add a bit more a local council flavour, if you like, to that particular policy, and then we can come back and put it on a council agenda and have a formal policy, and that informs the public, the media and everyone else that this is how we do business in this part of the world.
Thank you. So it's probably appropriate, since I generated the item, that I move that the report be received and that a workshop be held with councillors to determine the framework and content of a policy in relation to the manner in which meetings are held. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Paul McPhail, thank you. Any comment, feedback? Yes, Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Good ideas here from the Chief Executive, thank you. Can I ask that we do it into the new year? We're just bogged down at the moment, and staff is too, so I just don't want to see any more pressure going on us at the moment.
Councillor Fraser.
Totally agree with Councillor Reid. That was going to be part of what I said, but it's a public open workshop. Should that not be in the recommendation as well?
It can be. I'd be quite comfortable if you'd like to add that to it. So we're holding a public workshop. Yes. Any other feedback, comment? Councillor McKenzie?
It's just a comment, something that I picked up on that report. There was 3 words that really jumped out at me, and that is secrecy breeds suspicion. And that it basically jumped out at me. And I know this council does everything we can to be in public, but it's just human nature. And it's just those 3 words really jumped out at me. Secrecy breeds suspicion. Whether the secrecy is necessary or not can be worked out. That's just a comment I wanted to throw in there. Thank you.
Anything further from councillors? I'll put the motions then. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Which brings us to the end of the public portion of the meeting. And one of the issues raised by the Ombudsman is the way that we deal with the motions to go into committee. So picking up on the spirit of that, I will move that the public be excluded from the following parts of proceedings of this meeting so that we may deal with the items listed in the agenda relating to the confirmation of minutes of a meeting held on the 24th of October, consideration of matters associated with the Constitution and strategic review of WasteNet, and also a contract issue dealing with reseals and pre-sealing repairs. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Dixon. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. I would just like to have a 3 to 5 minute break, please.